What's up, YouTube? Rescue Rabbit 101 here, and since there's been such a high demand, I've decided to do an Evilswarm deck profile, like my last one. This one is updated through the April 1st ban list. This build is only temporary, and I haven't actually been to a tournament yet because of reasons. So, it hasn't been tested in real life, but I've been doing a decent amount of testing online, and it works out pretty well. There's some changes you can make, and I'll discuss this. I'll go a little more in depth with this profile, and I'll probably update this profile pretty soon because Star Ceres are dropping in 1 week, and that's going to make Shadows a prevalent threat because they can exceed now, which means they can get around this deck's lockout mechanism. But up until now, Shadows have been a really easy matchup with this guy kind of locking them all the way out. So there's been just a couple slight changes to the deck, but I'll go over them in kind of my reasoning. Now, this deck is really, really, really geared against the meta. And so I make a lot of calls because I'm expecting to fight a lot of meta, and I want to be able to counter that meta. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So 3 Evilswarm Caster, you have to play this at 3. There's nothing really to say. I mean, you can't not. The 3 Heliotrope, again, you have to play it at 3 because it's the rabbit target. 3 Mandragora, I really like this card at 3 simply because if you're going, it's a terrible card to draw if you're not going to use it immediately, but if you're going second, this gives you a second viable option besides the caster, and if you're actually in a losing position, this also gives you another option besides the caster to drop your 2 monsters. 3 Thunderbird. In the top 8 build that was posted, the guy wasn't playing Thunderbird, and I can kind of understand his decisions, but I really like Thunderbird simply because against certain matchups, you summon the Thunderbird and you go to attack. So against matchups like Yosenju, if you have, say, Thunderbird and a Heliotrope on field, and they don't have the Tsujic, it's actually really hard for them to out this field, because you can, especially if you then have the infection, because you can spin this guy away and then just normal summon him, and he's immune to basically all their traps, and both of these guys are bigger than all their monsters. So against certain matchups, Thunderbird is actually an exceedingly powerful card, simply because it's really hard to get around it, because it dodges all the traps and is bigger than any of their monsters. So that's why I like it at 3. I don't like the Salamander because I don't actually see the Jinlock as that much of the problem, simply because I play so many Floodgates. If you Jinlock me, I'm just going to kill your plays with my traps and sit here until I draw the Floodgates and my Jin outs. You know, I don't mind getting Jinlocked. The few times I get Jinlocked, I actually tend to end up winning. The 3 Karikian, you have to play that, and the 1 Rabbit. That's all the monsters in the deck. There's 16 of them. 16 monsters. 15 Evilswarms and 1 Rabbit. The ratio is perfect. I pretty much always open up with 2 Evilswarms, including at least a Caster or a Mandragora, to make my play, and if I don't, it's usually a Thunderbird, which is acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. And I don't like the Doomcow because I feel like it detracts from the point of the deck. Like, if I open up Doomcow in my hand, and I have the 2 Evilswarms, it's a dead card, and I'd much rather have the Doomcow be a trap. The Ailers you can play if you want, but again, I just don't like the card. Simply on the premise I can't use it under Macrocosmos, and I like Fiendish Chain better anyways, and I don't actually main Effect Negation in the main deck anyways, because while it's, effects can be a big thing, like, I'd just rather have traps that just get rid of the card at the beginning. And as you'll notice, my deck pretty much solely consists of monsters to make the Otheon and spell cards, and traps. I play, like, 8 spells. So, 3 Rhoda. This isn't even really a spell, it's more just a monster, because your only target's Caster, and you grab Caster, and it makes all of your plays, 6 Casters is good. 3 Pandemic. I have seen builds where you play 2, and I understand why. The only reason I play 3 is because of how I like to play Evilswarms, which is if I draw the Karikian, I want to be able to immediately detach from the Otheon. And if I'm only playing 2 Pandemics, the thing that happens is you can't actually detach both materials from the second Otheon to trigger another Karikian. You have to let the thing die or draw into the materials for a second Otheon, and that's the only reason. Plus, the card isn't actually, it's good against some matchups, but it's bad against the others. You can side it out, but I don't like to side the card out, simply because, the card, like, it puts in work, and basically any matchup will have 1 or 2 spell cards where you're going to want spell or traps where you're going to want to have a Pandemic. And it's never hurts to draw the card, actually, because, especially against trap-heavy decks, if I draw this, it prevents me from getting Bottomless or Torrential to, like, go into the Otheon. The one Book of Moon, this kind of took the place of Snatch Steal. I always wanted to play Book, there was just never any room, and now that Snatch Steal's gone, along with the 3 MST, I took all those out because I don't feel I need them anymore without Cleethorpes. This does what MST does to the deck. And if Cleethorpes, the biggest problem was you can't get around to Sacrifice in this deck and Skill Drain, and those are both to 1 now, and without Sacrifice the deck, they can't Pendulum Summon, so it's normal summon attack, and Recreate does not do the same thing for them because Recreate only is normal summon monster, so it doesn't actually lock out the Otheon. Book of Moon puts in a ton of work though because it can stop the Xyz play that could out the Otheon, and it's actually a really, really great card, and I really, really like it. And the one Raigeki because clearing boards is great, especially if you have Otheon to prevent them from getting, massive amounts of advantage, and if you clear off their bigger than Otheon monster and then make the Otheon, they can have a really hard time. The one Solemn, I still love the card simply because, in this deck, oftentimes they can't actually push at your life points because this thing's in the way, and they may have, 1 or 2 Xyz outs, and this just counters it, so I love Solemn. Bottomless, great card, I don't know why you wouldn't, especially in a trap deck like this. And the Compulse, those are just kind of the staple one. This card is so great. 3 Mirror Force, this is far better. I've done whole discussions about why this is better than Deep Prison, especially in this deck, because I don't care. I'm going to nuke your monster that's bigger than an Otheon. I don't care if you get your pluses back, you're not getting over the Otheon, and that's my important concern. I would rather just wipe your whole board out than banish the one card. This is something new I'm trying out. I've always wanted to try to stick this card into Evilswarms, or into some deck, but it just never worked out, but it's actually working out great right now. It's Time Space Travel, and for all those of you who don't know, I did a discussion on it, but if you don't know what it does, it says, when your opponent special summons a monster or monsters from the hand or extra deck, shuffle that monster or monsters into the deck, and you lose 1,000 life points per. It's an anti-pendulum card, pendulum summoning card, basically, because if you pendulum 4, I'm just going to bounce them all back, and I lose 4,000 life points, which is kind of the pain. But the thing you use this for is, I like this better than Fiendish Chain, because what this does is, it gets rid of the Unicorn. And you can swap Fiendish Chains into these slots if you want, but what I love about this card is if they go into the Unicorn, you can just bounce the Unicorn out of there, and they can't MST it. But generally they'll use the MSTs on something else anyways. The Mistakes, which you all know I main, because Mistake is great. You can play Mind Crushes in this slot, or Fiendish Chains in this slot if you want, but I'm trying out Time Space Travel. This might come out, this might stay in, I don't know. It's putting in work, but it's okay. It also bounces out Castells and 101s that they try to throw at you to get rid of the Otheon. It basically, most of the Otheon outs is Unicorn or something from the extra deck, and this can counter them. The one problem is it's not a counter trap, so you can play Blackhorn of Heaven in this slot as well, but I don't like Blackhorn of Heaven solely through the reason it doesn't stop Unicorn. And then another one of my techs that I'm trying out is 1 Xyz Reborn. I actually might bump this up to 2 and just cut these, or maybe even to 3, because what Xyz Reborn does to the deck is it's basically a mini Vanities, because if you Xyz Reborn your Otheon out, in response to, say, their spell card, it can be really devastating, and the really funny thing is that if you have an Xyz Reborn's Otheon against Necroz, they just lose, because assuming they got over the Otheon in the first place because they Unicorned it, so you still have your spell. They don't have any spell or trap outs, and Unicorn won't negate it because it wasn't special summoned from the extra deck. So I'm actually considering upping this to more copies, simply because if you do, this is almost impossible for a Necroz deck to out. Because, how do you out the Otheon? You can't summon anything that can get over it. You need the Decisive Armor. You need to drop Decisive Armor onto one of your monsters, and if I can stop that, or if you've already used the Decisive Armor, you just lose. And you can't get it back quickly, you just lose the game, because you can't Unicorn this card, which is really, really funny. And then the 1 Ring of Destruction, it's really going to be a staple now. This deck can't play Crush Guard, all your monsters are way too big, but Ring is incredible. The 1 Infection, this card is really, really good, but the reason you don't play multiples is because you never will trigger the second effect in a turn. So there's no point to playing multiples, but it's so good. I would not cut this. I would probably cut at least 2 of the Pandemics before I cut one of these, because this card can do what Infection does, but it can do it better sometimes, because if I have one monster like a Heliotrope on the board and you try to Mirror Force it, I'm just going to spin it out, and you can't chain another trap to get rid of it. And then through the Floodgates, I play 5, the 1 Macro, and The one macro, standard, this deck, I mean, you don't like your stuff getting banished because you can't Karikion anymore. You can't, this card doesn't work, but if it locks them out harder, it's fine, and it does more than DeFi. Vanities, standard, and the 3 mistake. I don't play, that's a 40 card main deck exactly. I want consistency. I don't play Mind Crush. I don't like Mind Crush. I mean, I like Mind Crush as a card, and it's great. I just don't see room in it for this deck because I feel like Mistake does. What people are not realizing, I think, is that Mistake does a lot of what Mind Crush does. The thing about Mind Crush is I prefer it in some matchups, like Yosenju. This card is side this out for Mind Crushes because you can Mind Crush the stuff that bounces back. But more often than not, like if you're playing, especially when you're playing against like Satellars, great, I Mind Crushed your Altair, or you can just not search it in the first place. Plus this locks out your Rotas, and if I can Mind Crush and hit your one Altair and know all the cards in your hand, great. Or you cannot do anything. Like I understand how knowing all the cards in your hand can help, but oftentimes you can guess the cards in their hand to pretty close accuracy. And, the exact knowledge can just force you to not attack. So, extra deck, there's really only one change in the extra deck. It's pretty constant. I finally decided to put in the 3rd Otheon. After I found out that Diamond Crab King couldn't out towers, I kind of gave up on it. The extra deck is really, as long as you're playing 3 of this card, which I've realized that you really do need to play 3. As long as you're playing 3 of this card, it doesn't matter what you play. Like, I hate to say it because it sounds so condescending, but if you play 3 of this card and the rest of the extra deck, among the remaining generic rank 4s and rank 4s that work in this deck, is pretty much up to you. I play 1 Bahamut because this card can steal games. I was playing against somebody, and I opened up a hand of Mandragora, Caster, Karikion, and he made Cyber Dragon Infinity. So what I did is I went Special Mandra, normal Caster, Overlay, Diamond Dire, attempt to pop. He went Negate, and I had another Evilswarm in hand, so then I normal summoned Karikion, made Bahamut, and stole it. And so that's why I play Bahamut. It can just, snatch a game, because it's really just a snatch steal, so it's quite good. Key Beetle, because you can produce locks with it, and sometimes, if you're feeling adventurous, you can go into it alongside Otheon. I pretty much never do. 1 Rhapsody. What's funny about this card is every time I leave it in, I never make it, and every time I take it out, I need to make it like 3 times. So I have it in here because it can win you games, but like most of the cards in here, it's really conditional. Cowboy, because it's a beat stick, and there's an OTK with it. I'm not going to go into the OTK. I think I've explained it before, but this card is actually good. It also just finishes games off. Dweller, you have to. I mean, Dweller's just incredible. Exciton, I don't play 2, even though this is Evilswarms. Like, I don't see a purpose in nuking their board twice. Like, you make it when you're in a down position. You don't want to encourage that. Especially because Otheon's generally just a better pick. Diamond Dire, I still like the card, but you can cut it if you want. I might, to put Crab King back in, because Crab King can still do work. Castell, standard, 101. I like one of each, because I actually make 101 several times more than I make Castell, but Castell can spin face up back row, which is, if they skill drain you. Well, no, that doesn't. Actually, there's not really a floodgate that hurts this deck that Castell gets around. If you're having problems with a Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, which you really shouldn't be, because that card does not hurt this deck that bad, you can Castell it, but I like 101 better simply because he steals the monster, and he's 20 bigger, and he can't die once. And actually, I've made 101 and just sat him in defense mode as a wall that takes 3 hits to kill. So, 1 Pappy. I know a lot of people said I should cut this, but the thing I really like about Papal Operative is this card can just win you a game. Like, if you're unsure if it's a fire hand or something, you can just flip it up and realize what it is. Or heck with it, I've actually won games by flipping something, not attacking it, and then switching it back into attack mode next turn, so it's lost 1200 attack, and, like, I do so much damage through it. That's what that's just, I really like Pappy, and he's a great accompaniment to Otheon oftentimes, so I wouldn't cut him. Like, you can do what you want with the extra deck, but I actually really like Pappy in this, and he's one of the few XCs I make consistently, like 101 Pappy, there's very few. Ragna Zero, I rarely make him, but when I do, he's insanely powerful. Basically, he's reserved for Boojins if they play the tanky, anything that plays the tanky, or Harpies if they play their field spell. and the 1 Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, because you can press the game with this card, or he can just be a really big beat stick. I don't make him much, but you don't make most of the things in that extra deck. You pretty much just make Otheon, Otheon, Otheon. Side deck hasn't really changed at all. I'm just going to explain why really quickly, because I've done explanations of this before. It's a really, really, really standard side deck. Dirge. This actually might get moved into the main as soon as Star Seraph Dolls become a thing. But pretty much, this covers every single matchup that you have the bad matchup on, pretty much. With the exception of the Cross, which is a mediocre matchup. Because what this does is, with an Xyz-based deck, they need to make that rank. And generally, the decks don't have the capacity to cover 2 ranks, 4 and 3. So what this does is it says, well, now you can't make the Xyz that will out me, and you can't special summon anything that will out me. So this just covers every single matchup that's bad, pretty much. 2 light Imprisoning Mirrors. This is Thirst to Tellers, which is actually a fairly hard matchup, and you'll see a decent amount of side in this. You can take these out. I basically never put these in. 3 MST. I feel like you have to play it in the side since it's not being main decked. Fire Fist Hate, anything that sets back row. So, Klee if you fight it. Like, it's just way too good. I side the 2 Mind Crushes. I don't own a third. That's probably the reason I'm not siding 3 and main decking some. The side deck I actually really like as it is, but what you could do is you can cut the Light Imprises and play 3 Mind Crushes, or you can cut this and play 3 Mind Crushes, but we'll get to that later. You probably couldn't see it with the glare, but I'll explain what it was later. 2 Fiendish Chain. You can actually bump this into the main deck and take out those time-space trapples, and I might do that. The deck is really variable right now. The more I go to a tournament, the more it'll solidify, and I'll probably update it once I've got a really solid build that I'm, like, for the Nationals season, just to show you guys what I think. So, Fiendish is very, very powerful in this deck, because, like I said, the things that get around the Otheon are monster effects, and generally they activate on the field. Or getting swung over, which is very rare, but it does happen, and this covers both of those weaknesses in one really fabulous card. But some matchups, it just doesn't pertain. Like, I would hate this card against certain matchups. Actually, there's very few that come to mind, but I don't like it in the main deck because, sometimes it just doesn't do anything for you. And I find that against every single deck, I can time space them at some point. But the deck is really variable, and, a lot of it, it's just as long as you're playing enough traps to protect the Otheon and enough monsters to get the Otheon out, a lot of it's up to you. The Dethai and the Soul Drain are standard. You don't need your graveyard, like I stated in this card, actually accompanies Karikion and this card, as in, you cannot go around this card. It is physically impossible for this deck to conflict with this card. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And the EEV. I actually have sided this in. This is a really funny card to use, especially against something like, you can flip this off against Necroz as long as you time it very well. And Yosenju, it's actually really funny against because they go into combo 1 trying to bounce your card, and you're just like, Eradicator. Now it's in the graveyard for me to use later as Karikion Fodder, and you just lost all your trap cards. So you no longer have protection as I beat your life points in for more damage than you're doing to me. So that's the Evilswarm deck you guys have been wanting to see. I think Evilswarm, especially with the elimination of Cleethorn, they lost some of their steam with Vanities going to 1, but with the elimination of Cleethorn, I think the deck has a real power chance in this format, because coming up on World Superstars, the biggest deck is going to be Necroz, period, undoubtedly. And the thing about Necroz is this deck's Necroz matchup, as long as you play it well, you can snag wins with Necroz. And that's the biggest reason I main deck the Mistake, is because this card can actually auto-defeat Necroz. I have won games by flipping up the Mistake and beating them to death, because they can't. They just can't do anything under this card. And that's what makes it more powerful than Mind Crush in my eyes. Mind Crush is great, but this card. Star Seraph Dolls. Shuttle matchup is insanely good. They have probably 4 outs in their entire deck. 2 Skullmata, 2 Dragon. And some of them aren't even playing 2 and 2 anymore. Some of them are playing 2 and 1 or 3 and 2, or so they have at least 3 outs probably. And then there's probably a couple more I'm missing, like the Canix C into the Castell or the Exciton, but that's pretty unrealistic because their level 4s also happen to be Squamata and Dragon. So, correlation there. Also, if they're playing Felice, Mathematician actually turns into an Otheon out, assuming you have nothing to negate it. But that matchup is already so sound and so solid, the Starstars will help them against you. But as long as you play an adequate lineup of traps, I think it can actually hold through. Because as long as you play enough traps to stop the Xyz summon of the Sereths, you should be all good and ready and set. And Satellar Sereths are probably going to be a big thing, along with possibly Burning Abyss. That's why this card might come into the main deck, because this will cover all of the matchups that will be prevalent. So I actually might move Dirge in the main deck. I'm going to test around with that once the set actually drops. But for all that's now, make sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content. Leave comments down below about things you think I should do to the deck and things you want to see on the channel. And Rescue Rabbit 101 signing out.